The countdown to shutdown as Indian Point powers down for good tomorrow. And the big question is, how do you decommission a nuclear power plant safely? Holtec is the company set to oversee the process, and the chief operating officer is giving her first television interview to our Tara Rosenblum. Tara.
And Ian, 20 million people live within a 50-mile radius of where I'm standing right now here at Indian Point. And over the decades, the power plant has certainly been at the center of plenty of controversy over a long list of safety and environmental issues, ranging from radioactive materials winding up in the Hudson to questions over the effectiveness over their evacuation orders. But what Holtec wants the people across the tri-state to know is that their safety equipment has been tried and tested. Since 1962, these two massive domes have graced the Hudson's edge, powering up millions of homes and businesses from Westchester down to Manhattan. But Friday, Indian Point will go dark, triggering the start of a highly complex process known as decommissioning. And the success or failure of that mission will largely hinge on the decisions made by this woman.
The bottom line is it will be safe.
In her first interview on the project, Holtec's Chief Operating Officer Pam Cowan stresses safety as priority one ahead of the removal of 6 decades of radioactive material still on site at Indian Point. This adds to a rapidly changing national nuclear landscape. Team 12 Investigates did some digging, and here's a snapshot of the nuclear map. About a third of America's nuclear plants, 30, are already in the process of decommissioning. Yet every single one of these sites remain undeveloped, empty fields. Holtec had planned to ship all of our nuclear waste to a temporary storage facility in New Mexico. There's just one problem. The facility doesn't exist yet. The Attorney General out there recently filed suit trying to stop the construction. But given the fierce opposition from the politicians in that state, what do you think is a realistic time frame for construction?
I would say years, not decades, but years.
Which means for now, Holtec must store the spent fuel rods at Indian Point in 130 dry concrete casks on these large pads above ground.
They could last over 100 years, if not longer.
In this exclusive video, you can see what preparing for the worst-case scenario looks like. A U.S. Army missile strikes a reinforced vault containing radioactive nuclear waste. The vault stays intact, the missile does not. And this is the same type of material that will store the nuclear waste at Indian Point.
They are made to be extremely robust.
Just 35 miles north of New York City, Indian Point's proximity to a dense population has always been a safety concern. Intelligence reports released years after 9/11 even indicated one of the hijackers might have been considering crashing a plane into the site. The immediate concern is long-term storage of nuclear waste near residential neighborhoods. What happens if one leaks? How will neighbors be alerted?
This isn't liquid fuel. These are fuel pellets inside of rods. I just don't think that it's a huge risk to anyone.
Reassuring information to some of the plant's neighbors.
I really trust the process.
But not all.
If there's a leakage or any concerns like that, yeah, that would be problematic.
Holtec still needs approval to buy the plant from Entergy. But once they do, they're promising to get the job done in 12 to 15 years, decades sooner than Entergy would have. How are you able to dismantle the plant so much quicker without sacrificing safety?
What you're talking about is instead of having the plant sit and then get decommissioned, the decommissioning start in earnest, 50 years from now, you'll see us start it right away.
I asked the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which will oversee inspections of the decommissioning, if they had any concerns over Holtec cutting decades off the job.
Well, that's why we're going to continue to be a watchful presence. But we've seen this happen in other plants. They've been able to safely move ahead.
One of those plants, the Oyster Creek Generating Station, is in New Jersey. We reviewed the recent inspection reports, but did not find any significant safety infractions.
It's an important step to having a rebirth in a community.
Cowan acknowledges change is hard, but she witnessed a community reinvent itself firsthand as a child growing up in the shadows of Pittsburgh's shuttered steel mills. What's more, she also has a unique personal connection to Indian Point.
My dad actually licensed Indian Point. He was one of the attorneys that was working on it with Westinghouse. So it's honestly with great pride that I'm able to put Indian Point to a proper end and allow for a rebirth.
So Tara, let's talk next steps. What does the future look like for Indian Point?
Well, in the short term, the New York State Public Service Commission has to take a vote mid-May, which is expected to pass. In the long term, the future is uncertain, and the reason for that is that there has never been a successful redevelopment of a nuclear power plant anywhere yet completed in this country. But I will say, despite that, there is a lot of hope in this neighborhood that eventually these 240 acres can be successfully redeveloped. The talk is that people are hoping this could eventually be a mixed-use development, half industrial, half commercial, but we'll have to wait years, probably a decade or longer, to see if those plans come to fruition.